Hello, welcome to the Crusader von Huygens Show. This episode will be covering secular humanism and some of the flaws of holding that position. For over a century now, there has been a rise in secularism, and a popular expression of this secularism is secular humanism. As a philosophy, secular humanism has several significant flaws with it, and this video will be exploration into some of its flaws. Secular humanism is a naturalistic philosophy that claims its atheistic outlook is rooted in science with a consequentialist moral system tagged to it. Let's break down that definition a bit and explain what secular humanism is. It's a naturalistic philosophy, which means that it believes that nature is all that there is and there is nothing outside of nature. Naturalism is a branch of realism, which states that the current world is the only real thing, and that there is no second state or war like the spiritual war. Secular humanists often claim that this is supported by science, though current achievements in quantum physics has practically killed realism as a viable theory, which naturalism is a sub-branch of. But more on that in a different video. The important thing here is that secular humanism states that its positions are based on science and logic. Lastly, secular humanism generally uses a consequentialist ethics system, which is a group of philosophies which argue that an action is ultimately moral or not moral based on the perceived consequences or results of that action. Secular humanism is a worldview and a religious worldview, but secular humanists inconsistently object to the assertion that secular humanism is a religious worldview. I believe one of the roots of the debate and problem is based on how one defines a religion. If one views and defines religion as an organized church centered around a sacred text that worship a god or gods, then secular humanism is not a religion. However, this definition is highly Western-centric and does not include many beliefs that would be regarded as religions. If the definition of religion is overly broad, like any belief system on the existence of the divine or the origin of existence, then atheism and even some science theories would be regarded as religions. When I say that secular humanism is a religious worldview, I mean that it's a worldview with a religious nature or acts as a religion. Comparing this debate with the question, is bald a haircut? If someone states that baldness is vastly superior to any hairstyle there is, and that all men should be bald, then bald is a haircut to that person. If it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, I'm going to classify it as a duck, even if it could be argued on some minute technical level that it's not technically a duck. Secular humanism has authoritative texts, an evangelism program, a system of morality, a viewpoint on the meaning of life. Thus, since secular humanism has many of the characteristics of a religion, I personally regard it as a religion or of an equivalent to a religion. I do the same thing with Marxism too, though I believe it's way easier to argue that Marxism is a religion compared to secular humanism. Additionally, secular humanism has to itself an inherent belief in humanity, and this is a religious faith in many ways, with faith in man replacing faith in the Lord. There are a few major weaknesses that I can see in secular humanism, and the first weakness I'm going to cover is that there is no basis to its morality. A general issue I have for all consequentialist philosophies is that they focus on the results of the action and not how it was done. I'm not the first to point it out, but it's very easy for a strict adherence to consequentialism can lead to a path where people do some incredibly evil things because in their minds the end justifies the means. Humans are generally poor predictors of the consequences on major decisions, so there will always be significant differences in the policy amongst consequentialists to decide what the best course of action is. However, the lack of a unified course of action on achieving good is a minor issue compared to what is that good. Humanism objective of the good of humanity is an incredibly vague adjective, and it can be interpreted in many ways in secularism. Secular humanism lacks any solid united basis for defining morality, and thus what is good for humanity is relative to each person's own opinion, regardless if those opinions are logical or not. One man's idea of utopia can be another man's nightmare, so there will always be internal conflict and chaos in secularism. Given the ends justify the means nature in true consequentialism, there will always be internal conflict and probably major chaos in secular humanism, because people will have different ideas on what is the ultimate good, and because the ends justifies the means, they will do anything to achieve that good. Another weakness with secular humanism is that it fails to effectively convince someone of ardently following the philosophy's ethical system. Secular humanism often argues that being good or doing the moral action is in one's best interest and beneficial to that person. Philosophers since Socrates and Plato have argued that good behavior is in one's best interest and bad behavior is not. However, this carries a hidden presupposition, which is that one should act in their own best interest. This presupposition, taken to its logical conclusion, defeats the basis of secular ethic systems, because there will be at times when it seems that acting morally is most definitely not in one's best worldly interests. Even ignoring the times when being moral will get one killed, which is, for atheists, can be kind of a bigger deal. Life will offer many situations where being moral is not in one's best interest. Ignoring or aiding morality of higher-ups or fellows, engaging in bribes, lying can be very rewarding in this war for some people. Just look at the many corrupt politicians. Additionally, it can be easily argued that, for this war at least, the optimal behavior for one's best interest is to engage in bad behavior, but be perceived as good. Hypocrisy often has the greatest rewards for individuals in this war, at least. Also, to do great evil and get away with it can be highly beneficial to one's worldly life. Many tyrants did incredibly evil things and were rewarded with worldly gain and power. One may use the example of Hitler or Napoleon as counterexamples, but they're not the majority of tyrants. Alexander the Great was a casebook example of a narcissistic psychopath, but was praised as one of the greatest conquerors. Castro and the North Korean leaders have not been punished for their many acts, and you just have to look into it to find how many crazy stuff they have done. Without a higher reason than it might be in one's best interest to do good, why should anyone faithfully follow secular humanism whenever secular humanism goes against their immediate best worldly interests and welfare? The third weakness of secular humanism is in regards to animal rights. The philosophy lacks the capacity to argue against the rights of animals. This is because secularism argues that we are just really smart animals and not a higher order above the beast. Taken to its logical conclusion, secular humanism will lead to animals having rights, or more likely, no one having rights. After all, naturalism states that there is no divine author of rights, so rights must be man-made. And if man can make rights as he sees fit, then man can destroy rights as he sees fit. And then rights are only just momentary privileges. Another one of secular humanism weaknesses is a rather odd problem regarding determinism and accountability. Although this philosophical and science debate on determinism is still ongoing, Secular humanism is generally in the hard determinist camp due to its naturalistic roots. For those who do not know what determinism is the belief that all events are causally determined by previous events, and there is no free will to change it. In its logical form, if A happens, B by necessity must happen. Determinism is still fiercely argued by many sides, and several counter-theories by philosophers and scientists have been posed against it. Hard determinism has gained a lot of steam in modern times by the works of Freud and Skinner, and this debate seemed like it could be settled in the favor of determinism until the advent of quantum physics. The famous physicist Werner Heisenberg argued that the causal model is incompatible with quantum physics, and that the statistical model should replace it, and the statistical model for many scientists has replaced it. Additionally, in the real world, there is not an actual distinction between the classical Newtonian physics and the quantum physics. There is just the laws of physics. No classical, no quantum, just one set of laws. Thus, if the classical is just an amalgamation of the quantum, the causal model is incompatible with the laws of physics. In addition, if the causal model is false, then determinism is false and is in direct violation of the laws of physics, because the statistical model states that if A happens, B is likely to happen, and not if A happens, B by necessity must happen, which is determinism. Additionally, the libertarianism philosophical movement, no relation to the political movement, got more popular in the 20th century and further strengthened the indeterminism side. But there's still people who argue for determinism to this day. But why is this important and is a problem for secular humanism? Well, there's a rather curious problem with acknowledging there is no free will in society. And that problem is that it can be argued that any form of punishment for evil behavior is completely unjust. The reason is because if a person has no free will, then they're merely a product of their environment and have no control over their destiny and actions. Thus, how can someone be held responsible for their wrongdoing if they're going to commit wrong regardless of what they wanted? I personally do not believe this is a problem and have argued against this problem, but several secularists have argued against holding people accountable for their actions. The most famous example is B.F. Skinner, who have argued against the prison system as it stands now. This problem is augmented by their first weakness, which is a lack of a base for their morality, because governments are now punishing people for merely breaking laws that they have made up based on their opinion. It is effectively a larger version of a guy declaring that wearing a blue shirt is prohibited and beating up anyone who wears a blue shirt. Thus, where does a person or group get the authority to punish others if morality is relative and a mere social construct? The last weakness of secular humanism that we're going to cover is that it does not effectively deal with the issue of existential nihilism in a naturalistic universe. Existential nihilism is a philosophical position that there is no objective meaning or purpose to life. Under naturalism, our existence is due to random chance, with no ultimate meaning behind it. According to naturalism, we live and die with no point to it all beyond what we give to it. Secular humanism tries to counter nihilism by appealing to our more nobler emotions with the charge of bettering humanity through secularism. However, if naturalism is true, then existential nihilism must also be true. And I've yet seen an argument from a naturalist that refutes nihilism. These are some of the problems that secular humanism faces. In my opinion, why secular humanism is not the most destructive religious worldview in the short term. In the long term, it is devastating to the good of humanity. Its proneness to moral relativism, devouring human life with naturalism, and much, much more are the fruits of secular humanism. I didn't even cover or touch on the fact that many secular humanists have great distaste for the traditional family unit, which is the basis of all civilization. I think the lure of secular humanism is that it gives the appearance of being moral, but ultimately its side is darkness. It states that it gives a meaningful, logical approach to life, but is nihilistic in its heart. It states that it's good for humanity, but if you read their work, it's surprisingly self-centered and egotistical. But regardless, secular humanism is wrong and a false belief, and there are many more flaws that I have not covered in this video. See if you can list any in the comments below, folks. Hope you all have a great day, and may the holy, holy, holy Lord God of hosts bless you all.